When you look at American history, clearly we're not a perfect people. I would argue we have the most perfect system that mankind has ever established. But the key to having a more perfect system is not only a more perfect system, but it's people with virtue. With virtue. People who embrace the idea of Americanism. People who embrace the Declaration and the Constitution. People who are proud of our history, a history that allows for progress, maturation, course corrections. Many societies, in fact, the vast majority throughout mankind, governments or societies are created and they never move off the dime because they don't have a constitution like we have, or they don't have principles like we have. And sometimes in our country, it's left to the subsequent generation to address things that the prior generation was unable to do for a variety of reasons. But there's one political party in the free world that has never changed, not since it was established. And that's the American Democrat Party. The Democrat Party has never embraced Americanism. The Democrat Party has never embraced the principles of the Declaration. The Democrat Party has never embraced the limits the Constitution places on power and the powerful. All the way back to Woodrow Wilson, one of the leading so-called progressives, in other words, American Marxists, even well before he became president or even thought about it, wrote extensively about the Declaration of Independence and dismissed it, trashed it. They did the same with the Constitution. Because if you believe in the Declaration of Independence, natural law, natural rights coming from God, it runs counter to the American Marxist ideology that's been with us really for 110 years. Actually, I would argue 130 years, late 1800s. All progressivism is the bastardization of Marxism with its customization and tailoring to the American system. But you cannot advance the cause of American Marxism, a.k.a. progressivism, without slowly but surely destroying the limits that are placed on government. Without slowly but surely destroying the Declaration's embrace of individualism and God-given unalienable rights. You have to substitute all that with man. That man makes the decisions. And of course, in every instance where that's the case, you have poverty, injustice, slavery, and genocide. Because liberty without virtue is exploited by evil people and evil ideologies who seek not justice, not equality, not peace, not harmony, but control. And this is the definition of the modern day and past Democrat Party. The Democrat Party was the party of slavery, lynching, and the Klan and segregation. The Republican Party was founded in the 1850s to stop slavery. That's the only reason the Republican Party was founded. It was created from nothing. It was the abolitionist party. After the Civil War was over, the vast majority of the freed slaves registered as Republicans. They voted as Republicans, and they voted for Republicans. And many of them, after the presidency of Ulysses S. Grant, many of them after the presidency of Ulysses S. Grant, who sent the army into the South to try and destroy the Klan. Then the Democrats took the House and cut off his funding. And the Klan grew, became an appendage of the Democrat Party, and vice versa. They still wouldn't accept the results of the Civil War. They moved to an entirely different tactic, segregation. That is, there is not to be any societal interconnection between the races. That the newly freed blacks under Lincoln, under Grant, under the Republicans, were to remain as chattel. Were not to have access to equal protection and due process as compelled by the 14th Amendment that was adopted in 1868. The Democrats resisted our founding principles, even after the Civil War, when a correction was made to how they were applied. A civil war against the Democrat Party. That's what it was. And so, right up until 1858, Brown versus Board of Education. From the late 1800s right up to 1858. Another 80 years. The Democrat Party imposed its will on black people. That's correct. Wouldn't allow them to vote. Wouldn't allow them to drink from the same water fountains. Wouldn't allow them to use the same restrooms. Wouldn't allow them to drink from the same fountains. Sit in the same restaurants. Wouldn't allow any of it. That's the history. Not of the Republican Party, quite the contrary. It's the history of the Democrat Party. It would eventually change. Even though Woodrow Wilson was a racist and a segregationist who resegregated the bureaucracy and the military after Theodore Roosevelt and Howard Taft had desegregated them, Woodrow Wilson required, as a new form of federal application for jobs, that photos accompany the applications, so blacks weren't hired. When he was president of Princeton University, Woodrow Wilson used to brag that not a single black person was accepted as a student at Princeton. And he embraced the whole eugenics movement, as did the entire Democrat Party. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Books are written about it. 60,000 people were sterilized against their will. What they called idiots, imbeciles, and colored people. You won't find any prominent Republican that supported that. In fact, they like to talk about Hitler over there, MSNBC, Joe Scarborough in particular. One of the leading Democrat lawyers wrote an entire book on the virtues of eugenics. You see, here's the problem. You can't create, man can't create a more perfect government. Forget about God. Remember what I said? They don't believe that. The progressives, a.k.a. the American Marxists, don't believe in any of that. Inalienable rights, the Declaration. Remember Obama used to trash the Declaration, skip the God part? I'm explaining this to you. So one of their prominent lawyers wrote an entire book on eugenics. Margaret Sanger supported eugenics, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and she was a favorite among the Klan in the South, where she was known to give speeches. Woodrow Wilson, Margaret Sanger, the Democrat Party, supported eugenics. That book I'm talking about became a favorite of a man who was sent to prison by the name of Adolf Hitler. That book by that Democrat lawyer was the first book Adolf Hitler had interpreted into German. And Adolf Hitler Well, he used to acknowledge that that book from America gave him the ideas about exterminating races to create a more perfect Aryan race. Just as the early American Marxists sought to create a more perfect population to accommodate their more perfect ideology. Of course, without the moral guidance of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. The Democrat Party, I'm doing this for a reason, and I can't spend the entire time explaining it all. It's in my book, but I want to explain it just in my own words here. The Democrat Party in the 1930s and 40s was still a virulently racist and segregationist party. The Federal Housing Act would become one of the great accomplishments of the early New Deal era. It was the first major piece of New Deal legislation. I heard a liberal, even on my favorite cable network a few months ago, point to one of the great accomplishments of the Democrats, the FHA. What she didn't mention was that under Roosevelt and in the New Deal, the FHA created the whole notion of red lines that I discussed the other day. Specifically, black communities or intermixed communities with blacks were excluded from the subsidies to build lower-income housing or to subsidize mortgages so poor people could afford housing. And what the federal bureaucrats used to do is take these red markers and draw circles around these black communities and provide those to contractors, lenders, developers, and anything within those red circles were excluded from funding. That's where you get redline from. Comes out of the Democrat Party. Franklin Roosevelt received a bipartisan bill, some Democrats, all Republicans, from Congress that hit his desk to finally outlaw the lynching of black people. A federal statute, if he had signed it. He refused to sign it in 1940. FDR would not sign the Anti-Lynching Act that was sent to him by Congress because he feared what cost him votes in the South, just as Joe Biden fears the river to the sea crowd and refuses to speak out strongly and powerfully against anti-Semitism. I will explain why I'm getting to all this in a moment. The Civil Rights Movement. Civil Rights Movement wasn't a Democrat Party movement. It was a movement in the black Southern churches. That's where it started. Martin Luther King and many other preachers. That's where it started. The federal government had its own racist and segregationist policies that it was very slow to change. Talk about the 64 and 65 Civil Rights Acts, and Lyndon Johnson's giving credit for them. 1957, Dwight Eisenhower, his administration authored a Civil Rights Act that would have done primarily what the 64 Civil Rights Act did, but he was approached by a Democrat senator by the name of Lyndon Johnson, who was the majority leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and he told Eisenhower, if you don't take the teeth out of this bill, the enforcement mechanism, I'm going to kill it.